Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the 167th Convocation ceremony of Andrew College. From an historic standpoint, this is our first virtual convocation. Be one of many firsts, but convocation is a time-honored tradition. I would like the platform party to please be seated now, but plan to stand. Everyone, please plan to stand for the invocation. The annual convocation ceremony indicates the beginning of the academic year. Andrew College is proud to welcome our new freshmen as well as our returning sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Together, we plan to move forward in our academic pursuits, our goals, and our discovery and exploration of our personal gifts and talents. I want to say thank you to our students, our speaker, and our faculty and staff for being here today, either in person or virtually. Convocation is a beginning for every student and every member of the academic community. I hope you enjoy your day and your experience at Andrew College. As always, this is 2020, and all programs stay fluid, okay? With that being said, I will now read the faculty greetings from our faculty chair, Katie Dodrell. As faculty chair, I offer you greetings from the faculty at Andrew College. For those of you who are new to Andrew College, welcome. For those of you who are returning, welcome back. This year is different in many ways from any school year that we have ever experienced. We have an invisible viral enemy, and we must be cautious and protect each other. However, while many aspects of Andrew College are different this year, many are the same. We still feel the excited anticipation that comes with a new academic year. Faculty still look forward to getting to know our new students and teach our new classes. The college still offers a place for students to grow, to learn, and to have fun. Let's work together to make this school year the best one ever at Andrew College. The student greetings listed in the program are usually delivered by the Phi Theta Kappa president. Due to the arrival of the coronavirus and the subsequent online classes last spring, the Phi Theta Kappa president will be elected soon. Next, our college chaplain, the Reverend Evelise Quinones, will lead our invocation, followed by our president, Linda Buchanan, who will welcome you to the new year and introduce our speaker. Please stand if you are able.
Let's pray. Gracious God, marvelous God, present God, how do you want us to remember the year 2020? A year with many hardships, a year of struggles, a year of massive pandemic and political divide? No. We know that you want us to declare your glory, our trust in you, that regardless what our human eyes see, our spiritual eyes proclaim the work of your hand. Today, in this wonderful moment, the 2020 Andrew College Convocation, the beginning of a new academic year, we believe and affirm that you are still declaring and proclaiming your glorious work over this great institution and around our nation and other nations. Grant us divine wisdom and grace on all of the things to come during this new chapter for staff, faculty, and students, that we can continue educating with health and safety. Continue giving staff and faculty the strength to serve and educate. Give our students the wisdom that can only come from you, O God, to learn and to accomplish their goals for this academic year. We present ourselves in humbleness to seek truth, to service those in need, and to do justice while giving you all the glory and all the honor. Bless and protect this new generation of students. Bless us all gathered here at Andrew College while filling us with understanding, creativity, curiosity, and freedom to reflect on you and your will. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning. Thank you. And my official welcome is the very proud president of Andrew College, who has a limit on eloquence today speaking through a mask, okay? It just doesn't quite fit. But in the Andrew College spirit, we improvise, we overcome, we adapt. So thank you, Mark Brown, and your intrepid crew. Thank you, resident assistants who are here in person. This was intended to be an honor for you. We wanted a live audience, a limited live audience, but we also really want to thank and recognize you for your service to the college during this very challenging time. It is not easy to enforce a mask policy. It is not easy to enforce a social policy that doesn't permit students who live in one residence hall building to go into another residence hall building, because we are trying to limit the effects of this pandemic so that we can provide as normal and enriching Andrew College president experience as possible. So thank you for your very hard work. This is a different year. As with most other ways we are conducting the college experience this year, Convocation is a bit different. But it's also very similar to those in the past, because we pause, we celebrate, we get formal, and we hear a message of an invited speaker as we observe the launch of yet another academic year. 167 years, that's a long time. And we're still here, and we're still having Convocation. A little bit different, not everybody all together in the gym, but we are observing Convocation, and that is a special time, and it's an important time. So typically, and as this year, as president, I make remarks of welcome, and I introduce our speaker. This is a different kind of year. The COVID pandemic makes it different, but so does an underlying, or is it an overlaying, kind of social turbulence that just seems omnipresent in some ways. In my lived experience of the past 5 months, coming to work every day in Old Main because I felt as safe there from the virus as anywhere else, and quite frankly, my internet at the house is not very good. All by myself in Old Main, along with Daphne Harden, your very dedicated financial aid director, because she too does not have great not great internet at her house. This last 5 months, this period of this virus, of a rocked economy, was also marked by the deaths of names you know very well in American society. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, now Jacob Blake. We're 60 days out of a presidential election, and I've been trying to make sense of our country and our world, and I've been trying to make sense of it in a way that I can express to you, and I will admit this before you. I cannot do it. I can't make sense of it. But here's what I want you to hear. As we process what seems to be true, and what seems to be clear on video, what seems to be consensus via Facebook or other forms of social media, or what seems to be evident based on a photograph. We must work harder than ever in our now semi-virtual world to discern what is true. So I ask you to really give yourselves to that process of discern what is true. That is something that our very good Andrew College education has always done, to work hard to discern what is true, and encourage you to develop those skills to do that. Second, so discerning what is true is the first thing. Second, empathy becomes not just a nice, soft, humanistic, liberal notion when we seek to know what is in fact true. Empathy, or the active intellectual and emotional process of placing ourselves in the situation of another, often requires imagination and leaps within us that are perhaps unimaginable. Given our background and values, empathy becomes the way that we understand the effects of this virus, any chance our society has for racial reconciliation, gender bias, cultural understanding, just to name a few things that our planet needs to work on. Empathy, my student friends, empathy is very important, critically important. This is what we are begging you to do, especially as we enter a Labor Day weekend. Empathy is very important when college-age students understand and reconcile that this virus might not make them very sick or sick at all, but if they transmit it to older or weaker people, it could kill or debilitate them. That's one of the most challenging things about this pandemic. If you get it, you might not even feel sick. You might not even know you have it. The word asymptomatic, did any of us know what that really meant back in March? No, we did not admit it. Now we know what that means. So it's about you keeping someone else safe. It could be your mother or father. It could be your grandfather. It could be your great uncle. It could be somebody that you don't even know that you come in contact with at Subway or Dollar General. So we are asking you, under the rubric of empathy, to just really understand what that means in terms of this pandemic. My friend LaGrange Police Chief Lou Deckmar, he's been a friend since 1997 when I arrived in LaGrange to work at LaGrange College. He will not remember this, and I did not bring this up in our brief time together before we came over. When I met him in 1997, he's very professional, he's very pleasant. He's not a Southerner by birth, and we share that, right? So sometimes our manner can be a little bit different. But he shook my hand, and it's very nice to know me, he said, and to meet me. And he said, okay, so you've got to do something about 307 Park Avenue. And I said, excuse me? And he said, one of your fraternities is just constantly tearing up this neighborhood down Park Avenue, which was within a block of LaGrange College. And so to go on about that, which are some great stories, okay, I will just tell you that if you've ever seen the movie Animal House, it was very, very similar, okay? And it took a little while. It took a little while to get a handle on our Greek system and that fraternity house in general. And I think I needed Lou's help to look up a Georgia law, something about unruly houses, something about people who own houses and rent them to people who have great big, blowout, disruptive things. So anyway, we fixed that together. We work well together. Not necessarily because we were in lockstep sync politically or philosophically, but because we had common priorities. May that be instructive for all of us. When the Virginia Tech shootings occurred in 2007, one of the victims of that shooting, that mass shooting, was the son of a faculty member at LaGrange College. Mike and Jerry Bishop became very active in the effort to ban automatic weapons. And I helped Mike draft a white paper that we presented to the state legislature. And I also observed Lou Deckmar very skillfully and honestly walk the line between constitutional rights as defined by the Second Amendment, the need to protect his police force, as well as the political tensions of the day. Very often, ladies and gentlemen, social problems they're not easy. They're not easy fixes. They're not clear. It's not binary, right? Your faculty talk a lot about binary, plus or minus, up and down, yes and no. The world just doesn't operate like that, unfortunately. So he's going to share with you today a piece of history that he brought to light several years ago in LaGrange, in Troup County. This historical episode is difficult to hear. Like many courageous conversations about difficult topics, there are benefits to raising such topics literally from the dead. And there are costs. But if we are committed to seeking what is true, and we are trying very hard to place ourselves in the lived experiences of others, these courageous conversations are what will, in fact, make our communities and our nations better places to live. Thank you.
Good morning. I think we're 6 feet apart, right? President Buchanan, Board of Trustees, administrators, faculty, and distinguished guests. And most importantly, Andrew College students. Welcome to the 2021 academic year. I'm extremely grateful to join you today, and it's a singular honor to be asked by President Buchanan to speak, because as she indicated, we've been friends for almost a quarter of a century. Thank you, Linda. Class of 2024, a special welcome to you. It's a special privilege and pleasure to address you this morning. As Henry VIII said to his 6 wives, I shall not keep you long. I want you to consider, though, this simple question. What will be the impact of history on you and your career? So in the last year, we've seen several sad and outrageous incidents involving police use of force. 2 weeks ago, I read an article headlined, Americans' Confidence in Police Falls to Historic Low, Gallup poll shows. The lowest in almost 3 decades. I went back to the office and I researched that Gallup poll, and I found that it rated 16 public institutions and the confidence level the public had in them. Sure enough, high public confidence in police had dropped 5 points, from 52% to 48% compared to the same time last year. But when I reviewed the other 15 institutions in that same Gallup poll, it showed that churches were 42%, public schools 41%, Supreme Court 40%, large tech companies 32%, television news media 18%, and Congress 13%. So of those 16 institutions, police was rated the 4th highest, having slipped from 3rd. All citizens have a right to expect our institutions to be honest, decent, unbiased, and ethical. For a variety of reasons, our institutions are challenged as it relates to trust and confidence. But today, I shall speak to the institution I know best, policing. Based on the rest of the poll, I felt somewhat reassured by the comparatively high standing that police enjoyed despite this last year. That was until I took a deeper dive into the poll, where the findings were cataloged by race. The poll numbers showed that African American confidence in the police wasn't 48%, it was 19%, less than half of the general poll. Regretfully, that lack of trust by Black Americans in police institutions was consistent with my experience as the police chief of LaGrange. For the last 25 years, I've worked with numerous groups and communities and mistakenly I believed that the personal trust I had established with African American citizens translated in institutional trust of our police department. But that was not the case. I was disabused of that notion several years ago by one of my captains. She saw two elderly African American women looking at historical photographs that were on the wall of the police department. As she walked by them, she heard one of them whisper to her companion, pointing to a picture of an officer that had served decades ago, "They killed our people." When the captain shared that with me, I asked her, I said, what's she referring to? And she indicated to me she didn't know. That's the first she'd heard of it. She wasn't raised in LaGrange, but her family was from LaGrange. Troubled by those words, I began my research of the LaGrange Police Department's history. In short order, I found articles revealing that in 1940, a young man by the name of Austin Calloway had been arrested and jailed by the LaGrange Police Department. The charge was assault on a white woman. In 1940, that charge could mean anything from a physical attack to a black man failing to avert his eyes as he passed a white woman on the street. Sadly, that was the nature of those times. A few hours after Austin's arrest, he was forcibly taken by gunpoint away from the police. He was lodged in the jail. 6 hooded men came to the jail and forcibly took him from the police. And within hours, Austin was discovered by strangers in a rural part of the county just outside of LaGrange. He'd been shot 5 times. Austin Calloway died a short time after arriving at the LaGrange hospital. During my research, I discovered no record of any police investigation. I found no indication that authorities mounted a search for Austin after his kidnapping. There was no community outrage. The only official notice of Austin's lynching was a comment in a grand jury report indicating that the LaGrange City Jail needed better locks. There was little interest by the local media. But there was significant national media coverage of Austin's lynching. The New York Times, the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune covered it as part of their editorial campaign for a national anti-lynching law. But that legislation was stalled in Congress and defeated by Southern Democrats in the Senate. Between 1870 and 1960, there were over 5,000 lynchings in the United States. 75 to 80% of those were African Americans. The number of lynchings in Georgia was second highest in the nation, second only to Mississippi. In our area of LaGrange, when I consider that history and then also the historic backdrop of the Tuskegee experiment, and Tuskegee's located less than an hour from LaGrange, where between 1932 and 1972, the United States Public Health Department conducted without consent medical experiments on African Americans. For over 40 years, the United States Health Department intentionally withheld vital medical treatment from Black Americans, clinically charting the progress of a disease that could have been successfully treated but was not. The result of their experiments, senseless and needless deaths to many of those African American patients. Throughout the South during this time period and before was the forced sterilization of African American women known as Mississippi appendectomies. And in LaGrange, we, like many southern cities, had our own history of slavery and segregation. According to the census in 1860, of the 128 counties in Georgia at the time, Troup County had the 5th highest slave population. After slavery ended, Jim Crow laws and black codes were enforced by the LaGrange Police Department and other institutions of local and state government. The context and consequences of all that history is seldom taught effectively in our public schools or our private schools. But African Americans who were alive decades ago passed that oral history on. They speak of incidents of terror and lynching and they share the history of those times with succeeding generations. That history includes a litany of injustices inflicted upon a race of people, and the resulting distrust of many institutions, including and particularly the police. Austin Calloway's lynching is a part of that history. My own failure to understand the consequences of history and race had for many years impaired my ability to guide the police department in a way that would build trust in communities that are most impacted by crime. I should have armed myself and our officers with the information and the history and the tools needed to deal with the frustration, hostility, and anger that would confront them in some quarters of our city. Without those tools, our officers' response in some cases only reinforced the African American community's historic perception of the police. But, in the words of Martin Luther King, the time is always right to do right. In August 2016, recognizing my leadership responsibilities, I approached the local NAACP president and asked him if he would work with me to officially acknowledge and apologize for Austin Calloway's murder. He generously and immediately said yes. Within a short time, that effort was joined by other interested citizens from the faith community, our mayor, a council member, LaGrange College president, and a state court judge. And importantly, surviving members of Austin Calloway's family. As a wise person said, some think we can move on from racially charged past by burying discomforting truths rather than confronting them. And so it would appear in this instance, because shortly after we began this work in some areas of the white community, I was asked, why should we acknowledge and apologize for outrageous actions committed by people who lived generations ago and are long gone or dead? Others in the black community suspected that this would be just another hollow attempt or effort to gloss over centuries of injustice and cruelty. To each I responded, the LaGrange Police Department that was responsible for Austin Calloway's death is still here, and its police officers carry the burden of that history every day. And that history is relevant today as evidenced by the comments made by those two elderly African American women at the police department several years ago. Ultimately, the work of our group resulted in a public acknowledgement and apology for the grave injustice done to Austin Calloway and our African American community. In the same church that held Austin's funeral almost 8 decades ago. That was only the first step. Many more steps to build trust within the African American community have followed, but there's still much work to be done. My point today, this work cannot be done unless we understand the impact of history on the problems that confront us today. And to that point, I want to speak to 2 additional considerations, and President Buchanan alluded to them. First, please understand if you pursue a career in a public institution, and I believe this applies to any institution, but unequivocally to a public one, there exists a social contract. It's not written, but it's no less binding, and it works like this. Citizens, through their elected officials, grant public agencies authority and legal processes to address problems and ensure services. But the other part of that contract, and where organizations frequently fail, is that anytime we exercise that authority over a citizen, they must be prepared to explain the use of that authority to anyone that inquires or complains and provide transparency in addressing those concerns. Police agencies that have failed to do that have, and we've seen it, the results have played out on the evening news for the last 3 months in protests and riots, which reflects the distrust and anger at that institution. Second, civility. Civility is critical to the functioning of communities in addressing difficult problems and issues effectively. Civility is the glue that binds us. It's the lubricant that allows difficult discussions and problem solving to take place without significant friction or a breakdown in relationships. Those that study human interactions list several elements necessary for civility. Civility requires us to be active listeners, to admit we may be wrong, to admit we may not know, and to admit that the criticism directed at us may be accurate. It requires self-reflection and understanding that we pick our battles and not allow good work or relationships to be compromised because of passion or anger. Sometimes we need to wait for the right time to address a particular issue. And we must ask ourselves, is the tension that's occurring worth it? Is it constructive? If not, park it and move on to other areas. Or as a black pastor friend of mine said, as we have done some difficult trust-building work around racial issues, if you're going to be a bridge, don't be surprised if you're walked on. Accountability, holding ourselves and others accountable for their actions, actively promoting an environment where all individuals feel comfortable and supported. And it requires us to keep our poise while expressing ourselves with determination, but also with politeness. And finally, gratitude. Be grateful for the blessings we have, and understand that optimism is infectious. As a police chief once told me, don't ever make an enemy unnecessarily. In the prevailing environment, civility is absent from the comments of far too many of our elected leaders at the national and state level. Ranting and name-calling have replaced problem-solving. I challenge you, as you look at difficult issues, to approach them in a manner that keeps the focus and hard work directed at the issues, not at individuals. A couple of years ago, I was in London for an International Police Chiefs Summit. After the meeting, I had occasion to visit the National Gallery of Art just off of Trafalgar Square. And in it, I saw and viewed a painting, 16th century, by Titian, titled Allegory of Prudence. It was a painting consisting of three faces representing the past, the present, and the future. The Latin inscription beneath the painting captures your challenge to understand the impact of history on our institutions as you begin a new academic year. It reads, "We learn from yesterday, so today we act prudently, and in that way we don't spoil tomorrow." There's no job or career field dedicated to addressing past harms. This obligation can't be delegated to the federal or state government. It's got to be done by people that care in an intentional and deliberate manner, one institution, one community at a time. It also requires people who share little in common, liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, progressives and traditionalists, to work together and continue to work together, because as different as each may be, they're united by a common purpose: to improve the future of their fellow citizens and their communities. I'm confident that Andrew College will transmit to you the hard lessons of yesterday, which is our history. So today you can consider that history and act with prudence as you study, learn, and work alongside those who have divergent backgrounds, opinions, and beliefs. And by doing that, you'll not spoil the future, but rather you'll improve it. Because when you leave here, the probability is high that you'll work for an institution that has challenges in the arena of public confidence and trust, particularly across racial lines. So I'll close with the words of my favorite philosopher, Dr. Seuss. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. Thank you, and a heartfelt welcome to Andrew College.
Thank you, Mr. Detmar, for a timely presentation and speech. The words that are said here we need to remember and to keep in mind throughout this year and when we leave Andrew College and go forward into our future. Thank you. And we appreciate your being here with us and would like to present you with this.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a flight to catch today, so I'll put it to good use.
Great, wonderful. Now, if everyone will please stand, the alma mater will be played, after which the Reverend Evelise Canones will give the benediction.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face upon you and give you peace.